ranked teams playing in that noon spot. Now, the fan doesn't care. The fan just wants the game to be later and better tailgating and more enjoyable and all that kind of stuff. But that's part of kind of how you end up there on that noon spot there for ESPN. Green Soldier on the subject of the Arkansas-Texas A&M game. Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. I just think that if you're looking at that game as a preview of what you may see next week when Hawks come here to Athens, I mean, the one thing to keep in mind is, and y'all can kind of mock me for touting A&M if you want to, but the best unit on the field is still the Texas A&M defense. And for everything that Kendall Browse has done as Pittman's offensive coordinator and what they're trying to build there offensively in Arkansas, they still have a very tough unit to deal with on the other side of the ball when it comes to the A&M defense. And ultimately, that's why if you're going to force me to make a pick in the game, I'm not comfortable making a pick in this game necessarily, at least compared to the spread. But if you're going to force me to make one, I'm going to lean on that Texas A&M defense because that's the truly elite unit that's taking place there in that game. Let's see what else. Green Soldier also says, hated for Jalen Kimber. Yeah, I do there as well. Let us see what else is going on. A lot of comments rolling in here, and we'll continue to take those as we kind of get into our R.S. Andrews cool down a little bit later on, too. So are we on the other platforms now? All right, so we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all the video platforms. Really appreciate you being here with us today. I think you're going to enjoy today's show as we start with some very strong words from ESPN's David Pollock on whether this Georgia defense of this upcoming season can be considered historically good. Also, on a number of topics, Georgia quarterback JT Daniels will weigh in with him today. Terence Edwards stops by. We'll give you more of a preview of the other games that matter in the SEC and around college football here this weekend. Let us do it all right now as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Meriwether and Tharp, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Meriwether and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
You certainly know what the story has been for Georgia football over the course of this season thus far. It is an offense that is getting better, I would say improving each week, and as guys get healthier, JT Daniels last week, other pass-catching targets in the week to come, my belief is you'll see even more improvement, or at least you have a very good chance of seeing even more improvement as all of that takes place. However, concurrent to that, a Georgia offense trying to get better, the one thing that you see is a Georgia defense that is as good as you start to wonder how you even finish that sentence. As good as we've seen from Georgia, as good as exists currently in college football, as good as Georgia's ever had, certainly as good as anything that Kirby Smart has seemingly had in his years as Georgia coach, which obviously date back to 2016. That there is no level of praise right now for the Georgia defense that seems totally out of whack, totally inappropriate, even with this group still trying to figure out the nature of its secondary. And Mike Griffith is reporting here at DawgNation.com on this Thursday that a guy in Jalen Kimber, who had a lot of excitement around him for the upcoming season, that he's now dealing with an injury that's going to keep him off the field for the rest of the year. Obviously a disappointing piece of news there for Kimber on the basis of Mike's reporting. But even with, injuries and, Tyke Smith trying to work his way back and what else is going on there with the Georgia secondary giving up probably more big plays in a game like South Carolina that you wanted to, even with that going on, it still seems like the sky is the limit for what the Georgia defense can do, including this Saturday against Vanderbilt, because of how well the front seven's playing at the moment, because of how dominant that group is and how impactful they are at making things very difficult for a quarterback, sacking quarterbacks, rushing the passer, creating those havoc plays, tackles for loss, things like that, that Georgia just seems to have found not just a stingy defense, because they've had stingy defenses before, but an impactful defense, the kind of defense that really does create a lot of negative plays. And that's one of the huge takeaways that you get when you think about Georgia right now. And obviously my words on this may matter to you, but the words of someone who really understands that side of the ball better than I do, those words probably matter to you a little bit more. So from that standpoint, I thought it was interesting this week when ESPN's David Pollock was on College Football Live. That's the show they do during the week, and the host asked him, David, is this a historically good Georgia defense right now? And Pollock, whose words carry a lot of weight on a topic like this, I thought he had a very interesting thing to say about that. Let's listen to the reasons why it might be, and the one thing, at least for now, that might still be holding it back. This is David Pollock.
But I'll say this, it's trending in that direction. But I'll tell you what, the back end haven't really been tested yet. Like, we thought Clemson was going to be a test, but apparently they can't score against anybody at any of the Georgia universities. Georgia Tech, I mean, they struggled to score against Georgia Tech this past weekend. So I'm not ready to go there yet, but what I see from the defensive line and the front seven, just the front seven, you know, you're talking about big Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker, Jalen Carter, Channing Tindall, Quay Walker, Nakobe Dean, Adam Anderson, Nolan Smith, the list goes on and on and on of great players who do multiple things.
So here's the thing I think you have to say in response to what Pollack is saying there, because what Pollack describes is probably the thing that we have all noticed as much as anything, that it's not like this is a defense. Like, remember, like, and listen, I love this player, so this is not a criticism, but you remember like when like Chase Young was like dominating for Ohio State a couple of years ago, and this defense was such a formidable foe to deal with, but most of it was about the one player, not the only, you know, kind of first round talent they had on that team, but so much of the fear of taking on that Buckeyes defense was the tip of the spear there that a guy like Chase Young provided with the pass rush. It was a dominant defense largely led by one guy. In the case of the Georgia defense right now, what we're talking about is something that's much more of an ensemble cast. What we're talking about is from game to game, you know, it could be Jordan Davis or it could be Nolan Smith or it could be Adam Anderson, or we've seen, you know, Jalen Carter get involved here. We've seen Nazir Stackhouse get involved here. We've seen, you know, I thought Devontae Wyatt, at least in my eyes, up here, he had a very good game against South Carolina. We've seen reserve players getting here and do it. Tramel Walthour has been seemingly kind of all over the place when he's gotten a chance to play. That it's not a kind of superstar vehicle for one guy right now. It's a collection of guys playing at kind of a superstar level. There are a number of guys, almost like a dream team style, you know, front seven here of outside linebackers, defensive ends, defensive linemen who are capable of kind of getting out there and doing all of that. And to me, and Smart doesn't need me to say this about him, but I'll say it nonetheless. The way that this defense is playing right now, I think is really a validation of the way that Kirby Smart has recruited on that side of the ball, because I joke about this a lot. There's the Georgia naysayer, there's the troll, there's the whatever you want to call him, who's always like, what happens to all these 5 stars once they get to Georgia? And like the thing that you keep coming back to is, well, look at the number of those elite recruits who are still here. And, you know, the other kind of person who thinks he follows the sport closely that says, well, Kirby gets those 5 stars, but how well does he really develop them? Well, the answer is apparently pretty well, because when you see what those guys are doing on the field here at this moment. And yes, none of those guys, Channing Tindall, who your David Pollack mentioned, or you can mention Anderson or Nolan Smith, or on and on you go, maybe none of those guys have exactly played quite as much as you might have wanted them to, or they themselves certainly would have wanted to the last couple of years, but they chose to be patient. They chose to endure the recruiting behemoth that Georgia is, standing alongside other players of a similar stature when it comes to a talent standpoint, and they have come out on the other end better for doing it and now contributing at the highest possible level, because those 2018 and 2019 signees were willing to be patient and kind of wait it out and kind of see, you know, what life would be like for them when it was their time to have the spotlight to themselves. This is what Kirby was recruiting for, starting with, you know, the number 1 class in 2018 and kind of rolling on 19 and 20, and the way that the talent has been stacked there when it comes to the defense. This, it would seem, was the vision that Smart had in mind. And it's too soon to know, does all of this result in a national championship? We don't know the answer to that question yet. But in terms of putting a bunch of talent, what was, you know, stacking that talent all there together, I think this is pretty well how Smart probably imagined it might work out if you just had great players at every level of your defense and you're rotating fresh bodies in to give those great players a rest, and having backups that are capable of coming in and in large measure playing as well as the more well-known starters are doing. This is about what you would imagine that Smart would have said about all of that. However, even with the Georgia defense playing as well as it has through the first 3 games of this season, there are also, like for every team in the country, imperfections. There are also still concerns. And you heard Pollack a moment ago say that he's not quite ready to say it's a historically good Georgia defense, but it could be trending in that direction. The one thing he still wants to see a little more of, well, Pollack on ESPN TV this week told us just that.
So many guys that can do so many different things, whether it's rush the passer, whether it's coverage, whether you're big, huge, physical guy that can two-gap or just slap you in the face and run by you and go get the quarterback. So the front seven has proven it is as dominant as we've seen in a long time. The back half will be tested throughout the season and have to prove that it belongs in the elite of elite.
So every Georgia fan who's watched this team closely over the course of this season thus far, I think would very much agree with David Pollock on that you could not ask for more from your front seven than what you've gotten. You could not have gotten a more dominant pass rush through these first three games than what Georgia's been able to provide. And Georgia fans are very grateful to have had that as a compliment to a secondary that for now is still trying to figure some things out. There were open receivers against Clemson. There were some pass interference plays that resulted in Clemson having a chance offensively. There were clearly some big pass receptions in the game against South Carolina last Saturday. Josh Vann, in particular, the former four-star receiver from Tucker, seemed to take advantage of a lot of that. And so Georgia fans, I would say with good reasons, would say, I love what the defense is doing, and I agree with David Pollock. This has a chance to be a historic defense by Georgia standards, maybe by SEC standards, maybe by college football standards at large. But, boy, let's see what's happening with the secondary. Let's see what that group is doing before we really make up our mind about this all the way around. And I totally understand that. And here's the thing that I think we would also point to and say there as well, that the real proving ground for what Georgia's going to be as a defense is not this Saturday against Vanderbilt. Certainly that's not a very good team. And it may not even be the following Saturday against a much better team in Arkansas. That when you think about what the Georgia defense has to prove, you think about that performance from that unit in the biggest games the team's going to play this year. Because, unfortunately, Georgia has been a part of what appears to be just an emerging trend across the sport. Too early to see if this is going to replicate itself here in 2021. But for the most part, when we've seen big-time college football games in the college football playoff era, which kind of dates back to 2014, when we've seen those big-time college football games in this era, it's really the team with the better offense that wins the game. And Georgia, when it's lost its biggest games in recent years, one of the stories of the loss was giving up a point total far higher than what it's used to giving up. That was true for the Florida game and the Alabama game of last season. Think back to the 2019 SEC championship. Georgia gave up 37 points to LSU. We don't see Georgia give up 37 to very many teams. But against a great offense in LSU in 2019, that's kind of what happened. 2018 SEC championship, Georgia was kind of, toe for toe with Alabama for the most part, even had the first half lead, but ultimately lost the game and did so by giving up 35 points. Once again, that's more than we typically see Georgia allow, but against a good team, that's kind of what occurred. So if you really want to take Pollock in his line of thought there seriously, and I think we should, what's it going to take for Georgia to be a truly elite defense, a truly historically good defense? Then you've got to shut down and sack quarterbacks in the big games the same way that you're doing right now. Now, I would say that Georgia did that against Clemson in week one. We don't quite yet know what the Clemson's offense is going to be. Reason to suggest right now it might not be very good, but that's certainly a step in that direction regardless of how Clemson plays the rest of this year. It's those big performances in the games in which the spotlight truly is on you. When you're getting the most attention, how do you play in that moment? How do you play in that spot? Now, Georgia doesn't play one of those kind of games at least until October the 30th when it plays Florida. But what you do over the course of the next few weeks, maintaining the level of consistency that you've had so far, is a way to help prepare you for that moment when it happens. It's also a chance to get more experience for this secondary, to find out which cornerbacks you truly trust, to get a Tyke Smith back healthy, to allow your safeties, who seemingly have been a big part of the solution for you this year, Lewis Seen and Christopher Smith, to still assert their authority over this group and make sure that everybody's kind of lined up where they need to be. Historically good, there's a chance that's exactly what Georgia is. It'll prove it when it plays its biggest games later on, and it's preparing for those moments with how it's playing right now. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Meriwether and Tharp, and glad to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We actually start at 9:45 on DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app. If you've never watched us on the DawgNation platforms, I'd love to have you check us out there. It's fun. We, this morning, took a few minutes worth of comments. We talked a little bit more about the Jalen Kimber situation that Mike has reported on there at DawgNation.com, and we just kind of dealt with all of that and whatever's going on with Georgia football before the real show begins, the big show, as I like to call it, we kind of get into whatever else is happening there at 9:45 and give folks a chance to kind of weigh in themselves. So we'd love to have you join us if you've never done so. Also, radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast platforms all across the landscape, Apple, Spotify, everything in between. Big thanks to our friends at Meriwether and Tharp making it all possible there as well. Your source for Georgia divorce. It means you can find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. And you know that as much fun as it is talking about college football, talking about divorce is not anywhere near as fun. But sometimes life is about doing things now so you can have more fun later on. And handling a situation like a divorce, if you know that's the next step, if that's an unavoidable step, if that's one of those things where you've considered all your options and this is the option, the next step for you, then it's important to do what needs to be done now so you can be set up for success later on in that next season of life. And that's why Meriwether and Tharp is so important, because they understand the intricacies of the law and the way the law impacts your finances and your relationships, especially with your children. All of those things are crucial when it comes to the impact of divorce. And Meriwether and Tharp understands that, not just from like a technical legal standpoint, but from kind of the emotional standpoint as well. The toll that it takes on you and those that you love when you're going through this. You didn't really want to be in this spot. You didn't certainly maybe ask to be in this spot, but that's where you are right now. So work to conclude this chapter of your life in a successful way. That's what my friends at Meriwether and Tharp will give you a chance to do. They'll be an advocate. They'll explain things to you. They'll walk you through the process. They're tireless workers and everything else that's needed in a situation like this. So find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. Theatlantadivorceteam.com, your source for Georgia divorce. All kinds of free resources there at that website. So don't hesitate to check them out. Don't hesitate to set up that free initial consultation and then make the decision to put them to work for you. Let them be your ally in all of this. Theatlantadivorceteam.com will get you in touch with my friends at Meriwether and Tharp. All right, it is Terence Edwards here coming up in a moment. We'll talk to Terence about his own thoughts about the Georgia defense, the way we started the show here today. We'll let Terence discuss that with us here in just a little bit. Also, hot topic of the week has been what's going on with George Pickens after being spotted at practice on Monday. Terence will give us some thoughts on that here coming up in just a little bit when we might see him back. Before that, though, I do want to go around the doghouse, presented today by our friends at Servpro. And yesterday, I thought that Georgia quarterback JT Daniels gave really a pretty revealing press conference where he talked about some of his own issues and kind of what he's kind of experience in his kind of year plus being here on campus at the University of Georgia, but also a couple of aspects in particular about the Georgia offense. So let's work through a couple of these things here right now. First of all, the oblique issue that kept Daniels out of the UAB game, exactly when it happened, what it's been like to deal with that injury, and kind of where he stands and all of that now. This is pretty interesting stuff from JT. Let's go take a listen to exactly what JT said about his current health status when he spoke to reporters yesterday.
I mean, it's getting better every day. It's something that's been hurt since fall camp, and it never really goes away. You play Clemson, then there was a little dip, so we focused on rehabbing more that week. Last week rehabbed, as much as we could. This week we're still doing the same thing, same plan. It's just going to keep getting better and better.
So a camp thing basically is where that developed for you?
That's when it started, yeah. And then the more you're throwing it, the worse it's going to get, if you're not combating that with rehab, which we're doing a great job of right now.
And we've heard Daniel say that before, how happy he's been with the rehab experience he's had there at the University of Georgia. But some of what JT says there is why I told you for a couple of weeks that, I was really pretty concerned about the JT Daniels injury until we heard more about it, got more clarity on it. Seeing him play last week certainly seemed like he was fine. But the idea that Daniels gives confirmation that, he was kind of dealing with this, kind of going back to even before the start of the season, just kind of lets you know that you may have gotten less of Daniels than you would like to have gotten in the Clemson game or throughout those practices, because obviously if you're not able to throw without pain, there's going to be some impact that you feel because of that. Now, the good news is the treatment that he's getting, and I guess getting some rest when he can, is allowing Daniels to now be healthier. He says he's getting better every day. To my eyes, I didn't see any obvious issues last Saturday. He threw the ball around very well against South Carolina, and we'll see if, he's able to, play well enough early on Saturday that he's able to go, get some rest and let the other quarterbacks kind of take over there. That'd obviously be a nice thing to see. But at the same time, this is still a guy who's relatively early and young in his own Georgia career. He's not necessarily a young guy from a college athlete standpoint. He's a class of 2018 signee. I'm talking about young, newly tenured as the Georgia starting quarterback. This would just be his, seventh game as a Georgia starter? Am I doing the math on that correctly? Sixth or seventh game? That this is a guy that's still getting in rhythm with those around him, and the playmakers in offense are still getting in rhythm with him. That may be the most important part of all of this too. So, if he's healthy enough to play, you want him out there. You want this offense to continue to get in sync, but I guess if you can also get him some rest by the time the game's done, you wouldn't mind being able to do that too. The other thing that I want to point out here from Daniels, which I thought was really pretty good, was for a Georgia offense in general, one of the issues is trying to get that running game going and trying to get that group kind of back on par and similar to what we sometimes get when it comes to RBU. And Daniels was kind of asked the quarterback, what do you think your role in all of that is? And once again, JT Daniels gave some pretty interesting insight into, as a quarterback, and not really a running quarterback, but as a quarterback who's just kind of in charge of the entire offense, what he views as a responsibility to get the offense and the running game in particular going. This is what Daniels said about that.
My role in controlling the run game has to do with getting us in the right run play. Every team has X amount of different run plays. We have a lot. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot. And each week there's things that are on me, and it's my job to make sure we're in the right one versus the right look. And then every quarterback at least tries to control one extra element with their fake, whether it be a fake RPO thrower, faking the zone read after the handoff. If you can get a safety's eyes for 1 second, it can be the difference between 8 yards and 6 yards. And I've seen it happen. Something our coaches emphasize a lot, and something that I really try and take into my game.
Yeah, so I think that's good stuff from JT there. And look, I think the most important way in which now all the stuff he said from a football standpoint is clearly true, and I'm in no position to disagree with any of that. However, I also think there's a simple point here that's also true as well, that the Georgia running game, in my mind, was better against South Carolina than it had really been at any point in time this season. And I don't think it's a coincidence that also happens in coinciding with the Georgia passing attack looking better against UAB, being also effective against South Carolina. My wish for Georgia offensively for a number of seasons now has been, can this play calling philosophy emerge? Can this offensive system emerge in such a way that it puts defenses in conflict? Forces defenses to have to choose. Do we want to throw bodies at the line of scrimmage in an attempt to stop the run? Do we have to drop guys back in the hope of stopping the pass? Do we want to try to bring pressure on the quarterback because he's picking us apart? Being the kind of offense that makes defenses make a tough choice. That's been my wish and my hope for Georgia for quite some time. And one of the reasons why I'm very excited about what I saw from Daniels as a healthy quarterback playing on Saturday was it seems like this Georgia offense is potentially on its way to being able to do that. Now, in the sentence I just spoke, the word potentially is doing a lot of the work. I certainly understand that, because when you think about where Georgia maybe in previous years needed to get to offensively, that's obviously a pretty long journey to go on. But it seems like right now, step by step, day by day, Georgia's kind of going on that journey. Yes, the RBU running back, situation right now is not quite what it's been for Georgia in the past. But the passing game is also, in my mind, a little bit better than it's been in the past. And at a certain point in time, for an offensive line that's still trying to find its way and figure things out, the potent passing attack just makes that job a little easier. All of a sudden, you don't have as many guys to block as maybe Georgia's dealt with in 2019 and 2020, when teams really were just daring Georgia to throw it over top of them and beat them. You can't dare Georgia in quite that same way anymore. The presence of Daniels changes that. The presence of some of these young pass-catching targets who seem to be emerging, that's changing some of that too. So I don't know how great the Georgia offense is going to be by the end of the season, but I do have a decent amount of confidence that with Daniels at the helm, this group's at least trending in the right direction right now. So I think that's pretty good all the way around. Before the show is done, you'll hear more from JT Daniels on the topic of George Pickens and what was seen from him on Monday, and when we might see more of Pickens than we saw this week. So that's coming up. But first, let me remind you that this is Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Servpro. And obviously for homeowners, there's a financial connection you have to your home. There's also kind of an emotional connection you have to your home there as well. And one of the scary things can be as a homeowner when you see this thing that you love, the house that you live in, when you see it damaged. And frequently that's like fire damage, water damage, things like that. It can really take a toll on you. And that's about more than just the expense of feared, concerned about, what that might be like. It's about the fact that you feel like the place that you live has been greatly impacted in some way. That's why my friends at Servpro can step up to the plate and make you feel so much better if you're dealing with anything like that. Because when it comes to fire damage, water damage, the impact that stuff can cause your home, that's what Servpro steps up to the plate and helps folks with all the time. They can repair it for you, they can fix it for you, and make it in your home like it never happened. That is such a valuable resource. It's the kind of thing that makes people feel better after they go through what can be a pretty harrowing experience all the way around. That's why I love recommending Servpro here on DawgNation Daily there as well. All their franchises are independently owned and operated, which is a good thing because it lets you know that you're getting the kind of family-oriented service that you want from a company like this. So please reach out to my friends at Servpro today, and they can help you with any kind of damage your home may have experienced, fire damage, water damage, everything in between. That's what Servpro can do. You can find them online. It's servpro.com. That's the website. I'll spell it out for you if you're listening to radio podcast. Servpro. Servpro.com. You can find out more about them today. So as I told you, here on DawgNation Daily, we're going to get more from JT Daniels before we're done, specifically on the issue of George Pickens. But for now, on everything else going around the Georgia program, and Dogs getting ready for that trip to Nashville and trying to stay hot as arguably so far the best team in the country through 3 weeks here this season. Let's find out the next steps to take for UGA. Let's talk to Terence Edwards right now here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Terence Edwards. Always love his insight on everything going on with Georgia football right now. And, Terence, I was just playing a little bit of audio for JT Daniels, who was healthy and back playing last week. And to my mind, as I said before, I'm not a doctor, won't pretend to be one, but he certainly looked pretty healthy. And the injury concerns that I had, for the most part, kind of alleviated by the fact that he just seemed to be so capable last week, and obviously the offense picked right back up with where you would expect it to be with him, kind of beating up on a lesser opponent in South Carolina. What did you see from Daniels last week? And I guess, how happy are you to see what to me looked like a pretty healthy quarterback who had the Georgia offense a week ago kind of firing on all cylinders?
He definitely looked healthy. The way he was throwing the football around leads me to believe that he's very high percentage-wise of 90 to 95% of being healthy. But he looked good. The offense looked good. And it just lets me believe that the Clemson game, definitely something was going on because we didn't try to use JT in any kind of manner of throwing the football down the field. So if this the offense that we can continue throughout the year and the way the defense is playing, then Georgia team is going to be there at the end trying to compete for a national championship.
I'm reminded, you and I talked on the show last week about, getting some of these young receivers going at home. And, that had been true against UAB. To me, it was true again against South Carolina there as well. I'll give Daniels a lot of the credit for this. Jermaine Burton catching another touchdown. A.D. Mitchell catches his first career touchdown there as well. That, we'd kind of said, hey, this is a comfortable environment. You're going on the road to Nashville this week. That's a little different. You got bigger games coming up in October, including a road game against Auburn. Get some of these guys that you want to lean on, whether it's a second-year player in the program or a first-year player in the program, get them going right now. And in my mind, that really continued for Georgia this past Saturday. I really saw a lot that I liked from the Georgia offense.
I did as well. We pushed the ball downfield. We use every receiver in the way that I think that fits their skill set. And everyone is contributing. It's just not one guy that they're focused on. I think having George out can be a blessing and a curse at times because he's so talented that we try to force him the ball sometimes. And we know that he will go up and catch that 50-50 ball. And with him, I call it 80-20 because it's 80% chance that he's going to catch it. Now we just being able to use all the skill sets that we have in multiple different ways to make the offense roll. And we have a lot of talent. I'm going to keep talking about A.D. Mitchell. I think he's a rising superstar. Ladd is playing well. Jermaine is playing well. The tight ends are playing well. The running backs, James Cook is probably the most productive running back we have right now. And I've been singing his praises since he arrived on campus. So we have a lot of talent. We just got to continue to put these guys in position to be successful.
I think it's exactly right. Before you joined us at the beginning of our show, we played some audio of your former teammate, David Pollock, on ESPN, talking about this Georgia defense and whether or not it might be historically good by the time the season comes to an end. We know the story here. This is a front seven that's as dominant as anything I've seen in the Smart era, and probably even before that. You probably have to go back to some of the teams you played on to kind of get, a front seven that looks as dominant as this group kind of looks like right now. But there's obviously still some questions in that secondary there, too. Mike Griffith reporting at DawgNation that Jalen Kimber now going to miss the rest of the season. That's another piece of that depth in the secondary that appears it's going to be missing here. So from your standpoint, given the totality of it, how historically good do you think this Georgia defense has a chance to be?
I think that front seven is up there with some of the best that we've had collectively. They're fast. They're big and they're fast. The back end, especially the corners, we need to continue to develop and work through that. I think the best defense we can have in the back end is that front seven getting in pressure so that back end doesn't have to cover as long. But that's my concern is that back end being able to hold up their weight, because we know the front seven is going to do their job. Just now the back end just have to do their job and not allow teams to beat us deep like South Carolina did a few times. That's my only concern, but if we continue to get pressure like we have, teams are not going to have time to throw the ball deep, and that's your best defense if your front seven is getting pressure, and now he's starting to see ghosts whenever, even when we're not seeing pressure, make balls inaccurate. So the front seven just got to continue doing what they're doing, and the back end just has to continue to develop as the season goes on.
Well, I agree with you right there. That front seven is such a weapon right now that it helps this secondary as it's trying to figure itself out there a little bit. But as a wide receiver yourself, when you see a guy like Josh Vann have the success that he had on Saturday against the Georgia secondary, like, what do you attribute that to? And I don't mean to ask too simplistic of a question, but is this as simple as, Vann's just running past people, or, in one case even kind of jumping over somebody? I mean, is this just a case of a good athlete having a good day, or is there something more complicated to it than that? Kirby Smart certainly was a little slow to want to diagnose that publicly here when he talked about it this week. But when you see a guy like Vann have the success that he had as a receiver yourself, what do you see from the Georgia secondary in that moment?
I just think sometimes, Bill, you just got to give the other guy credit.
Yeah.
He is a scholarship player. We did recruit him at Georgia, and I like Josh Vann coming out of Tucker when he came out a few years ago. So there was a scholarship player making two plays, especially the play on Kendrick. Kendrick was in position. He tried to high point the ball, but Vann just went over him and made a better play. Sometimes it's not schemes and not whatever. It just give the guy credit for making a play. The first play that he ran on speed was, I don't think we lined up very well. South Carolina got tempo,
yeah,
and he hit us quick. And I don't think we can line up and just play one-on-one coverage. I don't think we have those type of DBs right now. So just give Josh Vann some credit that he made 3 plays and got him over 100 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like when Vann was coming out of Tucker, this was a time in which Georgia was very interested in those really big receivers. You understand why you want a big receiver in the SEC. Obviously, look at a guy like George Pickens. He's used his size to great success. However, in the years since then, it seems like Georgia's also gotten much better at kind of like diversifying their receiver profile here a little bit of, they can't all be 6'2" guys, right? It's like you want to have that speedster a little bit too. You want to have that burner there as well. Somebody that can, whether it be a slot guy or just someone that uses speed sometimes on the outside there as well. That it seems like, for a while there, Georgia was really prioritizing, I think Barton Simmons used to call these like the Cadillac wide receivers, those big, long bodies, and maybe sometimes not the quickest and, not always the most straight line speed. But all of a sudden now you see a Georgia receiving core that I think is a lot more diverse in terms of the kinds of athletes that it's brought in. And, it's pretty clear that Vann showed you on Saturday that having that initial burst of quickness, that straight line speed, that's still incredibly valuable even in a league right now that kind of values the big receivers too.
Oh, I think so. I think at one point in time that's where football went, having the 6'2" and up receivers and trying to find Calvin Johnsons and the Random Moss. Like, you trying to find those big guys. But lately it has been a lot of diverse receivers around, trying to find that shifted receiver, trying to find they're still looking for the big 6'4" receivers, but it's just not putting all your eggs in one basket trying to find that big, tall receiver. Go out and try to find a guy who could play. And I'm going to give you a name that I wish Georgia would have signed. I worked him out a few times. The receiver at North Carolina, Josh Downs.
Okay.
Josh Downs is a heck of a receiver, and he's only about 5'9", but he can play. He can play, so it doesn't matter. In my opinion, I've always said you could be 6'5" or 6'1". If you could play, consistently catch the football, and consistently get separation, you could play on any level.
Yeah, I don't want to get too lost in the topic, but it seems like to me, Terence, and maybe you'll agree with this, it seems like the college level has been more obsessed with the big receiver than the NFL has been. You think about whether it be historically guys like Steve Smith or even more recently a guy like Tyreek Hill, that some of the guys that have had great success in the NFL are not necessarily the gigantic guys, whereas it seems like there's been a huge priority for those big, long-armed, tall receivers at the college level. But some of the guys who've dominated at the NFL level are not necessarily that body type.
No, correct. You have a lot of guys in NFL that's not that big. And I think one of the guys that's one of the more underrated receivers is Stephon Diggs, and he's not a big guy. Antonio Brown's been one of the better receivers in the NFL for the last 5 to 6 years, a smaller guy. So I think NFL is in the mindset of if you could play and you fit what we're looking for, you don't have to be a certain size, besides the quarterback, and I think that's even getting away from the prototypical 6'4", 6'5". They're looking for guys who could play and win games.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a name, so I'll mention one too, then we'll change the subject. But other night on high school, we had Kennesaw Mountain, and they have a wide receiver named Savion Riley who's going to Duke, not the biggest guy in the world, kind of maybe a slot receiver, type guy. But Terence, he can't be tackled. And you're kind of left to wonder, and not to say that Duke's not a great program, but you're left to wonder of, I wonder if being on TV here doesn't open some more doors for Riley, and maybe he gets more choices about where he, might want to go with his college career if he wants to go somewhere else other than to be with David Cutcliffe there, because it's another example of, hey, just because you're not, 6'3", doesn't mean that you can't play at a very high college level when you're dominating a pretty big-time game, for a high school football team on a Friday night.
Oh, most definitely. There's always guys that kind of slip through the cracks with the big programs, and just a guy that was playing big-time football right now for us is Ladd.
Yeah.
Continue to bring his name up, and, I think Georgia and Vanderbilt came on late for his services, and so there's always guys that slip through the cracks that evaluations might not be as high, and you missed on some of the guys that you had ahead of them, and you have to go find some guys to fill that role. And Savion Riley, I've watched, and he's a good high school football player.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of schools have missed out on it. If he continues to, sign with Duke in February, Duke is getting a really good football player.
Hey, let me finish with this. Speaking of receivers, one of the hot topics this week has been George Pickens, his return. Obviously, we don't know if his return is going to occur this year, but obviously gets a lot of fans excited when he's seen there at practice. He's at least returned to some portion of Georgia practice. A lot of reporters saw him there on Monday. You had Kirby Smart speak about this on Tuesday. JT Daniels is also pretty cautious when he spoke about this on Wednesday evening there. Terence, you know George. You understand the nature of a competitor who wants to come back from injury, but also a guy that's got a very bright future to think about as well. What do you kind of make of the current status of Pickens, given what's been seen, what's been said?
ACL is a tricky, and I only know of one guy who came back in the time frame that George has been right now. That's Adrian Peterson, who was able to tear his ACL in 3 months, come back and still be the best player, best running back in the NFL. Can I see George coming back? I could. I think if we make it to the playoffs, I think George probably would give it a go. If we're not in the college football playoff, I don't see it. That's just me. I don't have any inside information on it, but I do know he's working very hard to get back. If he plays or not, I don't know, but he's working really hard, and it's ahead of schedule is what I've been told.
Well, Terence, we certainly appreciate you being here with us on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp here today, and appreciate the work that you're doing. We talk a lot about receivers there. With all the receivers out there across our great state who want to get better, you've worked with so many of those, and obviously you continue to do that for folks even right now there as well. So for people who want to get in touch with you and find out about how you can impact their football career, how can they find more of you?
You can find me on all social media at Terence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terence, great stuff. We appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, good stuff there from Terence Edwards, talking a little bit about the current state of the Georgia Bulldogs and what's going to go down with George Pickens when he might be coming back, what you're seeing from that Georgia offense right now. Good stuff all the way around from Terence Edwards right there. By the way, I mentioned Savion Riley from Kennesaw Mountain, a guy we saw a couple of weeks ago on our drive for the GHSA state title on Peachtree TV and CBS46.com. We have one of our biggest games of the year coming up on Friday. Our good friend Rusty Manziel going to be on assignment and away from the broadcast on Friday. Jeff Sintel, of course, you know him from each week here on DawgNation Daily and all across the DawgNation platforms. He's going to be with me in the broadcast booth on Friday, and that's going to be a lot of fun in place of Rusty Mansell for this week, getting ready for one of the biggest games of the year when it comes to Lee County going to Warner Robins. Two programs with state championship pedigrees, two programs with elite, I'm talking about 4- and 5-star level talent on really both teams there. Obviously, Vic Burley, a huge name to know for Warner Robins when it comes to the class of 2023. Lee County similarly loaded, though. Freshman running back you're going to be hearing a lot about in the certainly the years to come. This is a terrific game. It's Peachtree TV Friday night. If you're outside the Atlanta kind of television viewing footprint, you can watch it streaming on CBS46.com. This is as good a game as we're going to do all year long. I'm happy to have Jeff Sintel in the booth for Rusty Manziel. Just going to be a good game all the way around. I cannot wait for that on Peachtree TV coming up on Friday night. All right, that's the situation there on Friday. Of course, you start thinking about Saturdays there as well. Let's go ahead and preview a few of these for you. It's our BetUS Best Bets. I look at the other big games of the weekend. I told our video audience this a little earlier. This is kind of a calm before the storm a bit. Kind of a relatively quiet week in the SEC before it really heats up in a huge way next week with huge games all across the board. But let's go ahead and preview a few of these as part of our BetUS Best Bets for right now. In Jerry World on Saturday, Texas A&M and Arkansas. This is a game that now sees Arkansas as a 5-point underdog here. At one point in time, this is probably about a touchdown in the direction of the Aggies. It's moving towards the Hogs here just a little bit. Worth noting that Jimbo Fisher in 3 previous matchups against Arkansas as head coach of Texas A&M is 0-3 in the spread against in all those instances against Arkansas. A&M has covered 5 of its last 7 SEC games. So they're in pretty good shape there in terms of the way they ended last season. This is one of those things where I still think if you're looking at this game, the unit that matters to me here is the Texas A&M defense. Obviously, Georgia fans have their eye on this game because the following week you're talking about Arkansas coming to Athens and the potential of bringing a lot of attention with them when they do so. But for now, while I am very impressed with what Arkansas has done, and Sam Pittman's 10-3 against the spread as an Arkansas coach thus far and gotten the big upset against Texas straight up on the field this year, as impressed as I am, I'm not quite ready to sell A&M in the spot as of yet. To be completely honest, this is a game that's more fun to watch on television than it might be to actually get some action down on, but we're going to make the pick as a part of Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews on Friday, so I'll make it here for you right now. I'll take A&M minus the 5. I'd like it more, obviously, at less than 5, and you may get it eventually. I mean, if you want to shop at BetUS to see if that Arkansas money keeps coming in, because Arkansas money had come in the beginning of the week that's moved the line in the direction of the Hogs a bit. If you want to get a little bit risky to see if that line moves more in the direction of Pittman and the Hogs before this game goes off, you might get a chance to do that if you really like Texas A&M. But for now, at 5, if forced to make the pick, I'll make Texas A&M there. Typically speaking, I love going against teams the week after they play Alabama, and I really love going against teams the week after they had probably a punch above their weight class type performance. That may have been what Florida did last week in what was in Gainesville been celebrated as the greatest loss of all time in the 2-point defeat at the hands of the Alabama Crimson Tide. They host Tennessee on Saturday. If this is any other opponent, I'm probably going against Florida here in this spot. But frankly, 20 points, which is where we're picking the game. There's been a little bit of line movement on this there as well, but we kind of locked these numbers in earlier in the week to make it fair for everybody who makes the picks with us as part of Go With The Flow. At a 20-point number, I do like Florida against Tennessee because I think the Tennessee defense is just so bad. I think right now this is a very pillow-soft team. I don't think there's any SEC toughness in the Vols whatsoever. And if Florida were on the road at Kentucky this week, the place they'll play next Saturday, I think you're talking about a much tougher spot and a much tougher situation all the way around. I just don't believe that Tennessee's good enough to challenge anyone right now. So believe it or not, it's a big number. Only the third time in the Mullen era that Florida's been favored by 20 or more points in SEC play. Last year, they lost straight up as a 23-point favorite to LSU and pushed in a game before that against the Kentucky Wildcats. So we haven't seen Florida in this spot very much, favored in SEC play by this big a number at home, but I believe they cover that number against Tennessee on Saturday. I'll quickly run through a couple of these others there as well. This is literally a put-up or shut-up type game for LSU at Mississippi State. Mississippi State, a 2.5-point home underdog here. They got robbed last week at Memphis. There's no question about that. Bad officiating hurt the Bulldogs big time, but I still don't think Mississippi State's a very good team. LSU may not be a very good team either. This is their last chance to prove if they have any competency whatsoever, because if this is still a team that has any of the DNA left from a 2019 national championship, then they go out and get some revenge against a Mississippi State team that embarrassed them in week 1 a year ago. So I'm going to take a hunch that LSU does that. Wins are hard to come by. The LSU schedule is about to get very, very tough. If they don't get this one, you start to wonder how much the basement may really flood for the Tigers here in future weeks. So there could be a little bit of self-preservation that powers Orgeron in this spot. 2.5's the number. LSU's on the road. I'll take the Fighting Tigers on that. Quickly on Kentucky, South Carolina, I like Kentucky here. I believe Gamecocks will win an SEC game this season. Certainly Vanderbilt, possibly Tennessee, simply not Kentucky. Yes, Kentucky struggled last week against Chattanooga, but if anything, that makes me like them more here in this spot. Kentucky may not be great, but they're too good to be bad 2 weeks in a row. So I think even on the road, will leave us, and this Wildcats offense probably shows up there. And then the one big national game of note is Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Soldier Field. That's game day. That's the big noon kickoff show on Fox as well. 6.5 looks like a lot of points for Wisconsin. I got to tell you, if you're watching Notre Dame right now, you're seeing a program that really has a problem. Something's not right with Notre Dame. I think a lot of it's on the defensive side of the football. If you look at what Cincinnati has done kind of post Marcus Freeman's departure, I think you're left to believe that Luke Fickell, is still finding a way to get a pretty high-quality Bearcats defense for the most part, whereas, Freeman's arrival at South Bend, even though it came with some hype and even though he's been kind of secretly whispered as a potential predecessor to Brian Kelly as the head coach there at Notre Dame, the results on the field for the Irish just don't say that right now. Did not, look great against Florida State. Florida State may be one of the worst teams in the country. Struggled against Toledo in a game that was on streaming internet. There is something not quite right with Notre Dame right now, and so that's enough to make me take a flyer on the Badgers minus the 6.5. That is our BetUS best bets. Always so good to have BetUS with us because, listen, they have been America's most beloved sportsbook for more than 25 years. You do not get to be that, earn that kind of status, that kind of recognition, if you're not taking really good care of the folks that are playing with you. BetUS is known for the best incentives in the entire industry, including when you sign up right now. When you go to BetUS.com, when you use the promo code DN125, that's DN125, you're going to get a 125% sign-up bonus. Simple language here. It means you put $100 in, you'll get $125 on top of that. That's a total of $225. That's what I mean when I say 125% sign-up bonus. So literally, before you place your first wager, before you win your first bet, you already start with more money in your account. You're already a winner. That's what BetUS can do for you. So find them online, BetUS.com. Use the promo code DN125 to get 125% on your initial sign-up bonus. And those are our BetUS best bets for the upcoming week. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp, let's turn our attention back to the Georgia Bulldogs here for a moment. And for a moment, not quite what we're going to see on Saturday against Vanderbilt, but what we might see in some future week. Obviously, George Pickens was spotted at Georgia practice on on Monday. Georgia reporters invited into the practice facility for the first time in a couple of years. Pickens was the thing they noticed while being there. We played audio for you yesterday of Kirby Smart, kind of giving you a pretty wide-ranging view of what Pickens has done and what he still needs to do to have any kind of consideration of being back on the football field. And with that in mind, a very thoughtful guy, JT Daniels, also shared some well-thought-out opinions about what really matters when it comes to George Pickens there as well. So to be fair and balanced, because obviously we talked earlier this week with the possibility maybe we do see George Pickens again, when at one point I guess I'd probably kind of put that out of my mind that might be likely to happen. As a way of being fair and balanced here for a moment, here is JT Daniels. I wouldn't say it's negative. I'd say it's realistic. A realistic appraisal from Daniels about what really is still out there for George Pickens. This is pretty good stuff from JT. Take a listen.
Yeah, the most important thing is, make sure you're ready when you come back, is what I'm always going to tell him. I'm going to keep telling him, as much as I want George back in the starting lineup, because I don't think there's anybody better than him anywhere. I think him being fully healthy and fully prepared to play is the most important thing. It's about the person before the player. With the guy that has the chance that he has, for his future and his potential, as much as we'd all love to have him, I think the most important thing is making sure the person is ready and, he's medically cleared. And, of course, I have great trust in our training staff. But I don't want him to, say it's better than it is, and I just really want him to be focused on making sure he's rehabbing, doing the right thing. And when he comes back, he's coming back at full speed.
I mean, here's the one thing I don't think anybody would dispute with Georgia is there's no way that anything other than what Daniels describes there will be true. You just trust this Georgia staff to do that because, here's the thing, is obviously Georgia cares about Pickens, but even beyond that, they have an incentive to be seen as doing right by Pickens, other guys they have. In other words, there is no gain, even a short-term gain, from being self-serving of, let's rush George Pickens back, let's get what we can get out of him, and, we'll let him move on after that, and, we'll just kind of move on ourselves because people notice. So not only does Georgia have its own authentic, genuine reason for wanting to care for its players, but also it wants future players that look like George Pickens. So you better believe they are paying very close attention to how do you take care of a guy like Pickens? How do you use him when he is healthy? And how do you rehab him when he's working his way to get back healthy? All of this kind of stuff, that's the kind of thing that players are watching closely. And listen, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but as much as we talk now about name, image, and likeness and all this other stuff that's of interest to players, how soon will you play me? How well will you play me? How well will you take care of me if I'm unable to play? That's still the backbone of a recruiting effort. That's still the I would say the most important thing that parents and advocates for players, they care about. Yes, it's kind of nice to get a football card or a T-shirt or a restaurant endorsement, whatever these guys are getting this. And I understand all the excitement around the kind of start of the name, image, likeness era. But it's the nuts and bolts of recruiting that matters more than anything. How will you handle injured players? Can you make an injured player healthy again? Can you make them feel healthy again? Can you set them up for a chance to impress NFL scouts possibly come this late winter and spring? That's the stuff that recruits are watching closely, and what they're seeing right now is, I believe, Georgia doing right by George Pickens, and maybe that results in him playing again this season for Georgia. Maybe it doesn't, but it certainly looks like a program that has its I's dotted, its T's crossed when it comes to taking care of its injured players, and I think that's a thing that Georgia fans ought to feel pretty good about. Something else you can feel really good about as we head towards the weekend, whether you're watching pro football tonight, me and Jeff Sintel on high school football tomorrow, or a busy day of college and pro football on Saturday and Sunday. Nothing goes better than pizza, and there is no better pizza for the occasion than our friends at Marco's Pizza, because when it comes to Marco's Pizza, pizza lovers get it. Not only do you get the golden crust baked to a golden brown, the 3 melty cheeses on top, those old world toppings that kind of just go so great with that there as well. The video always looks so good. It's always tricky when I see this video because we're getting close to lunch and I'm already hungry as it is, and the Marco's Pizza video there is only making me even hungrier. And you know what else I'm hungry for? I'm hungry for great savings, and Marco's Pizza can do that for you too. How about a bundle right now? You get the large one-topping pizza. You get a pizza bowl, which is like the pizza flavor without the crust, which is actually kind of an amazing invention. Talking about space-age technology. We're getting pizza flavor without the crust. A lot of folks trying to avoid carbs and things like that these days. Well, that's what the pizza bowl gives you a chance to enjoy. You also get the cheesy bread there as well if you want your carbs on the side. $21.99 is the price here. A large one-topping pizza bowl, cheesy bread, all just $21.99. Unbelievable savings. The Marco's app or Marcos.com. That's how you can order. As I said before, Marco's Pizza. Pizza lovers, get it. And as we close out here today, our Gator Hater roll call has been very Florida-centric as of late. Florida fans have been running that yap after the close call against the Alabama Crimson Tide. As I jokingly said before, the greatest loss in the history of college football. Florida suffered it last week, or maybe celebrated it last week. Maybe that's what they did. They celebrated the greatest loss of all time. No one's ever been better in defeat than Florida was last week against Alabama. Congratulations to them for that. And, of course, that has gotten Georgia fans fired up. We've had a lot of Gator-centric golden shoe submissions, including this one from one of our best guys, Forestry Dog here. Now, I don't really know the full context of this. Is Dan Mullen a big Jimmy Buffett fan? Because you've got the – this is actually – like, Forestry Dog, you got to really, like, understand, like, how talented he is. And I'm going to go past my music here for a second. But that's like the Florida font for all their social media stuff. It says, I'm a big parrot head, a pirate born 200 years too late, Dan Mullen. And then Forrester Dog says on Twitter that Mullen hoped that nobody caught him in his hula skirt. First of all, if you're watching on video, this is the kind of thing you can't really unsee. This is also the kind of thing that got Jim McElwain in some real trouble when he was kind of seen shirtless with the shark, or at least a person that looked like Jim McElwain. The face of Dan Mullen on the hula skirt dancer there, that is a tough look all the way around. That is not really Dan Mullen, at least I don't believe it is, but pretty funny stuff there from Forestry Dog on that. Golden shoe winner for today. And speaking of those lousy, stinking Gators, how about 37 days from right now? That is our Gator Hater Countdown. We will see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. So here's the thing. We will go a little longer today with comments than we did yesterday because we were very short on our comments yesterday, and I don't mean to shortchange all of you who tune in for the chance to interact together here during this portion of the time. Can't go forever, but we will go a little longer than we did yesterday. So hopefully all of you are doing well. And let's see what else is going on here. Let me go to DawgNation.com first. I'll check in over there. I'll do Facebook. I'll do YouTube. And then we'll bounce out. Getting ready for high school football tomorrow on Peachtree TV. College football on Saturday from Nashville. If you're going to be in Nashville, try to find me. I'm not going to be there for very long. I'm not going to be doing there is no Dog Nation invasion for me in Nashville this time around. I'll be getting to the Music City and fairly early on Saturday morning and probably, hitting a trail out of Nashville, kind of quickly on Saturday afternoon. But for those of you who are going to be doing all of that other kind of stuff right there on Broadway, hope you have a good time. Matt Rukavina says, have pity on Florida. They went from competing to, quote, nobody plays Alabama tough like us. Yeah, listen, it's a great loss for Florida, for sure. A great loss. And listen, I'm not going to say that there aren't some people in the Georgia world that have bragged on, Georgia's close calls against Alabama too. I mean, listen, Georgia fan base is million strong, right? I'm not going to tell you there's not some Georgia fans somewhere that haven't done that. But like the one thing you've never, you can go back and listen to every tape from however many years you want to go back. The one thing you've never heard us say around here is, Georgia got a lead against Alabama at the half. Like, we have never claimed a moral victory on that. Never have, never will. That's if anything, the fact that Georgia had the halftime lead in these last three games against Alabama and lost, that makes it more frustrating, not less. There has been none of that from us around here. None of that. Let's see what else. Daniel Calvino says the only good thing about noon games is if I'm in California, they're at 9. I don't have to wait all day to see my dogs play. Honestly, I'm super jealous of that because I am a big sports fan. And I'd love nothing more than just to be able to watch all the sports that are on. Like, for instance, like the Braves right now. The Braves were in Arizona last night and have been the last couple of days. And like, I can't stay out. And Arizona's not even the worst. There are games that start much later than that. You actually play in the true Pacific time zone because Phoenix is a mountain time zone, right? You play in the true Pacific time zone. I mean, that's just a disaster. But even like a game, like Monday Night Football starts at like, for me, 8:30 or something like that. I mean, I can't hardly make the end of Monday Night Football anymore. So, I mean, I just fall asleep. I mean, I hate to be that way, but I'm chasing kids around and trying to do this job, which I love, but still. By the end of the day, I don't have a lot left to give some days. And so my head hits that couch, and I am out like a light. So I do think about this. So if you live Pacific time zone, that means on an NFL Sunday, games start at 10 a.m., right? So the first window begins at 10 a.m. Then you're rolling into a 1 p.m., and then the Sunday night game for us starts at 5 p.m. West Coast? Think about this. You've watched a whole day of football. Now it's only 8 p.m. You can go to the gym if you want to. You can see your family if you want to. It's like, you can – I mean, to me, like sometimes I do think about this. Like when I retire, I doubt I'll ever even will retire. But if I ever did retire, sometimes I think like going and living somewhere in the Pacific time zone would actually be kind of a fun thing to do. You can watch a bunch of sports. The weather's pretty good. At least in most places in the Pacific time zone, the weather's pretty good. And you just get all the sports in, and then you can still go to the early bird dinner special if you want to. So I have definitely thought about that before. All right, over here on Facebook. Kathy Aquavia Green and Hugh Nash talking about a pilgrimage. Oh, there's a music festival in Franklin this weekend. First of all, Franklin's a great place. Great place. Who all is performing at the music festival in Franklin? What all acts will be there? I saw where Bonnaroo got canceled a couple of weeks ago. Who all is performing in Franklin this weekend? Jimmy Durham says, what's my honest grade of the offensive line? Do you feel like Coach Luke is getting the best out of them? I'm not to a point right now where I necessarily have a criticism of Matt Luke. The offensive line needs to play better. I'd probably give it I'm toggling, I guess, between a B- and a C+, I guess. I guess that's about where I'm toggling here at the moment. I mean, I haven't really seen a lot of pass protection issues. I mean, the Clemson game, that's just a tough defensive front that you're battling right there. So because of that, I might go B-. You're not giving it an A, but I think that you've kept your quarterback upright enough that you're probably not giving it a C either. Does B-, does that sound right to you? But as you take a step up in competition, that also gives you a chance to swing that door one way or another. That you can be a B- through 3 games against a couple of tomato cans, but it becomes a lot harder to earn that B grade against Arkansas, even a little bit against Florida, and quite possibly some against even a little bit against Auburn, and quite possibly against Florida. I'm thinking about Javon Dexter and Brenton Cox and some of those guys there as well. Earl Smith says Eric Clapton's playing tonight in Duluth. So I guess we got concerts back, right? That's kind of cool. That's before I had kids, I used to go to concerts all the time. A lot of you think I would, a lot of you think I live in the studio, but the truth is, like back in the day, I was going to a lot of music, live music type things. Don't quite get out as much anymore as I used to, but I used to do a bunch of that kind of stuff. Let's see what else. Amos Williams says West Coast people get to enjoy all-day college football, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. nonstop. Yeah, I'd love it. I'd love nothing more than watch those Pac-12 after dark games and Hawaii kicking off really late. The other night, I want to say BYU, Arizona State didn't start at 10 o'clock or something crazy like that. I'd love to watch all that kind of stuff. Man, I fall asleep. Joel Moody says the brunch beatdown. I like that name. He says it begins at 11 a.m. Nashville time. Bloody Marys for all. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of bloodies flowing. That's going to be it's going to be for sure. There are going to be a lot of Georgia fans that kind of crank up at that. Randy Hall says it's later one of my favorite songs. It actually really is, Randy. From the Derek and the Dominoes version of Eric Clapton, Layla, who a lot of you know the end of the song because it's in Goodfellas, but the beginning of the song with the guitar lick at the beginning. I mean, if you're going to say top 5 classic rock songs of all time, there's no question that Layla would be one of mine. No question. Now, what I don't like is, back in the 90s, they did the MTV Unplugged thing. Some of the Unplugged stuff wasn't too bad, the acoustic style stuff. But I always thought that the acoustic version of Layla was, I didn't like it because I just think that the true rock and roll electric version of it's so good. And what's funny is the Layla acoustic from Unplugged was one of the more popular singles I think ever emerged from that entire era of kind of MTV Unplugged style music. But to me, there's no substitute for the real thing, just as good as it gets. By the way, Philip Jordan Wells also kind of tying in Saturday's opponent, Vanderbilt, to the Commodores, and of course Lionel Richie and the Commodores, great as well. Ryan Walker on the subject of Jalen Kimber. Yeah, we talked about Kimber a little earlier. A disappointing thing. I had a chance I bumped into his dad before the season began. We were talking about Jalen, and there are a lot of folks really excited about seeing what he brings to the table, and just a real disappointment right now for him. I think he's going to still be a very good player. You just gotta kind of fight through this and get back out there. And obviously Georgia would love to have had him this season there too. So pretty disappointing all the way around. Adam Mathis says people say Kirby can't develop, but what about 3-star Eric Stokes of the night and 3-star Jordan Davis? Proud of our team and coaches. Yeah, I mean the whole Kirby can't develop thing. I just think the claim on that's pretty specious all the way around. Anyway, there's just not a lot of evidence for that. And you cite some very specific, important evidence here of the success they've had with the 3 stars who've gone on to be great in particular as a pretty strong data point there. Green Soldier says, of Florida, when the standard for the best season is 4 losses, celebrating 1 close loss isn't all that crazy. That's actually a pretty good point. Florida fans better hope Kentucky can't stop the run unless their passing game takes off. That's exactly right. I mean, here's the thing. It's like deep down, Florida fans do know. I mean, as much as I go back and forth with some of these people sometimes, when they're not, and the truth is I probably do the same thing, right? It's like I'll probably say things, to a Florida fan that I would be willing to admit the otherwise to some Georgia fans. But deep down, Florida fans know how far their program is from what it once was. They do truly know that. You see this in message board chatter all the time. It's just they're not going to readily acknowledge that to a Georgia fan or, some other rival fan, probably mostly Georgia fans right now. They're not going to acknowledge that in open conversation with them. But when they miss out on recruits, when they don't show up in even, the list of finalists for a lot of the elite recruits, when they do, believe you me, when they lose another game, and eventually they're going to, when that happens, at that point in time, you start hearing the real chatter kind of coming out, and they do start talking a little bit more openly and honestly about what they are as a program. You don't get that right now because they can talk themselves into the idea that the game against Alabama proves they're going to win the rest of them. But when that doesn't happen, now you see the way they really view themselves. And in those moments, you see a much more realistic appraisal of the situation. What else is going on? Antonio Jones, good to have you here today. Appreciate you being here. G. Grace Bama Boy going at Florida fan. I still have my suspicions that Florida fan is an actual Florida fan. I sort of think he may be a Fed, but that's just kind of because we see this from time to time, right? It's like I can tell who shows up here as a real, genuine fan of their team, like Nature Gator. Like Nature Gator's not a fan. Like he's obviously a Florida fan. And guys like Jordan Bowman and G. Grace, guys like that, I mean, they're putting their real name out there. They're truly fans of their team. But there are a couple people kind of show up here sometimes that I sort of get the impression they're just trying to get y'all, doing whatever. Hey, Michael, can you do me a favor? There's this thing in here on the YouTube. It's a name streaming. This was in here the other day. Can you just block that commenter? Are we able to block it from from the administrative level? So we'll block that, y'all. Like we don't ever hardly block anything, but that's like true spam. So we'll block that. At least we'll try to. Light Dog 1968. We're gonna try to take care of that for you. Jerry Dog Fan, I like this take. Listen, I love it when y'all give me strong opinions, and Jerry Dog Fan got a good one here. He says, Florida loses at LSU 2 weeks before UGA. Yeah, listen, I'm right there with you, Jerry, at least in terms of this being a game worth watching. It's one of the reasons why I said what I said about LSU going to Mississippi State on Saturday. Like, at a certain point in time, we may all just have to give up on LSU and say it's over, it's done with, that Ed Orgeron really is Gene Chizik, the kind of guy who won a national championship and didn't do anything with that. At a certain point in time, we may have to say that. But I'm not quite ready to do that just yet. I'm going to hold out some belief that LSU is still a dangerous opponent. After all, they beat Florida last year as a 23-point underdog in Gainesville, so they can clearly beat them in their own stadium there as well. So I think that's a pretty strong take. And Jim McLaughlin says he already blocked the spammer before, which is good. I mean, like my rule on this is at the administrative level, we try to block as few people as possible. I just don't want to do that. But you should be encouraged to block anybody you want to that impacts your ability to enjoy the show. I don't think we've ever blocked anything other than that. Tim Miller says, what's going on with Rick Gilbert? At this point in time, I just don't really know. But it's not I don't think we're 1 week away from magically seeing Eric Gilbert at Georgia practice the way we kind of saw that with George Pickens this week. I don't get the impression that's where we're heading. Shelton Tucker says we can't lose to Florida, period. No, you can't. And this is the thing, Shelton, that I've been trying to say there for a while, is that, look, I love making fun of Florida. And I love, like you'll hear me say this at the end of every show, Georgia's going to beat down Florida, Georgia's going to, whatever. like I like speaking that way as a fan, but there's also the need to kind of have the more serious conversation about it, which is that none of us should expect Florida just to sort of lay down and give it to UGA, right? It's not like Georgia's going to walk in there and steal Florida's lunch money without Florida trying to put up a fight. They are going to try to put up a fight. I genuinely don't believe that Florida is as good as Georgia this year. It is a game I expect Georgia to win. But if anything, I think the result for Alabama and Florida on Saturday was at least good for, some of the folks within DawgNation to get the idea that, there were some people that were grossly underrating Florida at the beginning of the season. We tried to call that out when it happened. And if we're going that far off brand to say something, you better believe we must believe what we're saying. Otherwise, we just wouldn't say it. That, to say that Florida's not a top 25 team, to say that Florida's not still a challenging game for Georgia or anybody else is just kind of overstating the matter there. And I don't mind, good-natured trash talk, and I participate in that. You hear me do it every single day. But Georgia ought to be viewing the Florida game as a revenge game. They ought to be viewing the Florida game as a game where it has something to prove. Georgia doesn't inherit the SEC East and a spot in the SEC championship game and the spot in the college football playoff. You got to fight for it. You got to take it. And, Dan Mullen's going to try to prevent that from happening. Todd Grantham's going to try to prevent that from happening. You're going to have to go out there and take it if you want it. Matt Rugavina says, what's up with the Pro Football Focus Twitter handle saying we don't have a top 5 defensive line? Honestly, I can only handle so much Pro Football Focus, and I'm not necessarily against it, but it's like at a certain point in time, they're so in love with their own evaluations that I don't know. I mean, I joke during the offseason that we have a tendency to be somewhat hypocritical, whereas if PFF touts a Georgia player, we cite that as evidence. But if PFF touts something other than a Georgia player, we cite that as evidence that Pro Football Focus doesn't know what they're talking about. So, we're probably a little hypocritical on that from time to time. But, their ability to fully scout this, I think they're more impressed with their own abilities than sometimes the average football fan kind of is. And so you can kind of do with that what you will. But, by the way, Lynn Johnson Shipman agrees with me. Layla, the original version, she says favorite song of all time. Lynn, you have great taste. Steve Highland calls it pretend football focus. I'd also accept faux football focus as well. I'll accept that there too. But, I mean, I just think the Georgia defensive line has done everything you could possibly ask for them. And, like the biggest area in which Pro Football Focus had its issues is, think about some of the quarterbacks that's touted in the preseason recently. A couple of years ago, one of their 3 highest-rated SEC quarterbacks was Jared Garantano from Tennessee. How'd that work out? One of their 3 highest-rated quarterbacks coming into this season was Emory Jones. How's that working out so far? It's it seems like especially at the quarterback position, that's where they kind of run into some of their biggest issues. Now, I also see people using some of their stuff pretty effectively, right? It's if they're going to measure things like broken tackle rate and things like that, listen, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go back and rewatch these games and measure how many tackles that Zamir White broke. I'm just not going to do that. I don't have time to do that. That's not interesting to me. But if somebody else wants to do the work, I'll gladly read it. So from that standpoint, I'm not saying everything they do is useless. Sometimes the raw data is actually more interesting in their interpretation of it. And I mean this for a lot of analytics type people. It's if you're giving me, total snaps or yards before contact for running back. That's another one that can be kind of interesting sometimes. Sometimes for some of those analytics type websites, just the raw data is more interesting than their interpretation. Give me the raw data, I'll interpret it myself. But that's maybe how best to use some of that kind of stuff. By the way, Jennifer Caldwell Sperlin, happy birthday, Jennifer. That is incredible. Happy birthday to you, and I hope you have a great one. I'm happy to have you celebrating. And Jimmy, thanks for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate that. Jimmy Durham, thanks for bringing that to my attention. Earl Smith asked about Jamie Newman. Yeah, boy, I hadn't heard much about Newman. Last I heard, he was actually still trying to catch on with a football team. And, listen, that's an odd situation, a very weird situation. I know, for a lot of Georgia fans, I've told you before that, there's a lot about what happened with Newman last year that I find very frustrating. And even with that said, still sort of hated that the football career fizzles to the extent that one seems to be. Shoot him 556 also shouting out some birthday wishes to Jennifer over here on the YouTube side. So Nature Gator over here, touting Emory Jones. Good luck with that. Back over here on DawgNation.com for a moment, then we got to get ready to go. Bruce Eklund says, listen to Session Men for a good doc on some Muscle Shoals musicians. Yeah, I've actually heard that was pretty good. I've actually heard that's pretty good. I think I've heard about that anyway. Yeah, I've heard that's pretty. I love a good music doc. Like a few years ago, Showtime had that documentary on the Eagles, which I thought was really good. It's like, I don't even care if it's like a band that I just love. Like I used to like to watch all those old VH1 things. And even like there was like that VH1 Classic, which was on deep cable. I don't even know if VH1 Classic even still exists. It was deep cable. And they'd have some great like making of documentaries about albums and things like that. I used to love that kind of stuff. Let's see what else. Randy Hall asking about us redoing the studio. I actually have a meeting about that coming up here in a little bit. So we are getting ready to move into some new digs. It's gonna look a little different. It will look a little different, and I'm excited about it. And we're getting ready to do that, pretty soon here. So yeah, that's coming up. All right, one or two more, and we're gone. I hope everybody's doing good. Shelton Tucker doesn't like the game in Jacksonville. You and Mike Griffith can get together and talk about that. Let's see what else. Calvin Sanders Jr. says the Washington Sentinels need a quarterback if Jamie's still looking for a pro job. Jamie Huff says he thinks that George Pickens will come back next year. That's an interesting prediction. Back over here on YouTube, then we're gone. Foster Moss says, do you still need that Auburn fishing reel? Yeah. Those of you who don't remember the offseason, these are the kinds of things we entertain ourselves during the offseason, that Auburn's bass fishing team got in trouble for some violations, which we just thought was very perfectly Auburn. The fact that they were, as much NCAA trouble as their football team has had, the fact that their bass fishing team also dealt with their own violations, that's pretty funny all the way around there. We'll make Thomas T-Bone our last comment of the day, saying, I'm hoping that when Georgia faces Bama, I hope we can beat them this year. If not, we'll beat them one year. I got confidence in my Bulldogs. Boy, that sounds great. And, yeah, I mean, I love the idea of Georgia getting that done. I think about what December could feel like if it's as big as the game could possibly be. And frankly, there's a part of me that doesn't want anybody to do it but Georgia, if you know what I'm saying on that. So I'm right there with you on all of that. All right, as we get ready to wrap up here today, y'all check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. There's a very funny column from Bill Torpy, who kind of covers the beat there in the Atlanta area. Very funny photo of, like, if you ever driven Atlanta traffic, you know how crazy it can be. It's like these three cars that kind of get jammed into, like, one spot trying to get off an exit. That's as Atlanta as it possibly gets right there. And so good stuff from Bill on all of that. Also, as we said before, the Braves magic number starting to whittle down here just a bit. Falcons on the road against the Giants on Sunday. I mean, it's hard to have must-win scenario, but if Atlanta's going to be able to do anything, handling its business with all due respect to the Georgia guys who are on the roster, a pretty bad Giants team. If you want to show something here in 2021, this is as an easy a road game as you're going to probably have to be able to do just that. Hawks got training camp get ready to start. That's hard to believe. The rest of the landscape of high school football, AJC always providing great coverage and all that. So make sure you check them out online at ajc.com. Also check out RS Andrews at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, RS Andrews can replace it for you the same day. But you got to find them online at rsandrews.com. All right, y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow for RS Andrews Cool Down. And then at 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp, 9:45 for our 1st and 15. It'll be day before game day before I head towards Tennessee and Nashville for the game against the Commodores. And for those of you doing the same thing, hope you have safe travels. And for those of you who are trying to get a little bit of work done as the week gets ready to conclude, good luck with all that there as well. We will see you back here again tomorrow.